Welcome to Let's Talk About Love's Stories from Everywhere. I'm your host, Jill Ferguson, and today I have a fascinating guest with me and one of my favorite people, Ralph Galloway. How you doing today, Ralph?
Excellent, Jill. Thank you so much for asking, and thank you again for having me.
Oh, of course. So we met probably in like 2019, I'm thinking, somewhere around then.
It sounds
Um,
all right.
Yeah. And it was our chiropractor introduced us, of all people, because you wanted to write a book that is focused, it's historical nonfiction that's focused on your family's history, right?
Yes,
And how did that come about? Why do you think that's like a story, right? Why is it noteworthy?
because it's a family story that is based on overcoming obstacles, showing that possibilities are possible even when circumstances look impossible. It's the story of my great grandfather who was born into slavery, but became one of the wealthiest, not cowboys, but cattle ranchers in central Texas in the late 1800s into the 1900s.
Wow. And if I remember correctly, there's actually a statue or a monument to him, right, in somewhere around there?
It's actually in the city where he lived, which is San Saba, Texas, central Texas. It's about 90 miles northeast of Austin, Texas, as a point of reference. The historical society in the town erected a monument, not directly to him, but to their family, the Galloway family. It particularly focused on one of their sons, who was a well-known cowboy. But because he was the son of the family and the family had historic roots there in San Saba, they've referenced the entire family.
Well,
And
that's amazing, and that's not something that every family can say, right? Like, "Hey, there's a monument in a town devoted to my family and my family's history."
I hadn't thought about it like that, but that's very true.
So, what really made you fall in love with the story of your relative?
Because I didn't know it growing up. And I felt that it was a story that had so much hope and so much inspiration in it and so much love that I thought it was a story worth telling. It dealt with overcoming adversity, dealing with trials and tribulations and setbacks, and at the same time having the resilience to overcome those things and continue on and being successful. I just thought that that was such an amazing story.
Well, and it's I mean, you clearly you've loved diving into the history, you've loved learning about the family. How old were you when you first learned about this? Because you said you didn't learn about it in childhood?
No.
Or or you were older than 20, if you don't wanna say your age.
I was 21 the first time I actually went to the ranch in
Okay,
San Saba, Texas. 21 years old. And the ranch house was still standing, and I had relatives, my grandfather's daughters and my great grandfather's daughters, and actually my grandfather's sisters still lived there, some of them, three of them, I think. And going into the parlor, they had these beautiful family portraits on the wall. And I could not have imagined seeing that or anticipated seeing that, because by 1973, the house was built, I think, the ranch house was built. Oh, this version of it probably in the teens, 1913, 1915, something like that. A two-story ranch house, beautiful. I have photographs of the original home. It was absolutely beautiful. And to see these portraits hanging in the parlor of all these family members, I said, wait a minute, who took portraits in the teens of a
yeah.
Black family? And what's the story here? Now, mind you, this is my father's family. My father had been to the ranch as a young kid, but he didn't particularly care for it. And so his memories of it were not very vivid. And they were vivid, but not in a good way, because of the work he had to do. And he just didn't like being on a ranch, a working ranch at that.
Yeah.
And he was born in 1930. So my grandfather, his grandfather, my great grandfather, died in 1937. So my father was only 7 years old when the person that I'm writing about passed away. But he had been around him, he had been on the ranch, so he had some exposure. He did not, because he didn't have a good experience on the ranch, he didn't have good stories to tell me about it. So it wasn't until 1973 when I went on my own. It was between my junior and senior year in college. Threw my stuff in the back of the car and said, I'm just going to travel across country. And I wound up in Texas and wound up going to the ranch for the first time and meeting some of these relatives. And it was just amazing some of the stories they started to tell me as they were pointing out these different portraits on photographs on the wall. So that piqued my interest then, but that's 1973. I'm still, finishing up college.
Right.
It was interesting, but not really thought provoking. 2005 rolls around, and I'm thinking about. Uh, I'd asked some of my relatives something about the history of the Galloway name, and nobody could tell me. They said we got it from some white man in Texas. That's all we know. Because it's not Johnson, it's not
Yeah.
Smith, it's Galloway. And it's like,
Yeah.
where did we get that name? Some white man in Texas. So I started doing research and used Ancestry, and I met some phenomenal people. I took the DNA test, and as a result, met some phenomenal people who were a match and who shared with me uh, the history of the Galloway name and who we got the Galloway name from, where, and when. So it was just very poignant and very historic to me to find people who were willing to share with me that story and that they knew it or they had bits and pieces of it and they passed on what they had heard or what they had been told. So that gave me the historical perspective of the name and who the people were, Galloways that were white in Texas. And then I went back to San Saba to where the photographs and the history of the ranch was located and started talking to people there and talking to relatives who at that time, 2005, were still alive, who could tell me more about what had happened. And then I started looking through archives, libraries and archives and historical societies in Texas, and found newspaper articles actually about some of the things that had happened to Henry and to his family during that time, and some of the things they were involved with. And it was jaw dropping. That
And Henry is your great grandfather.
yes, Henry is
Yeah.
my great
Yeah.
grandfather,
Yeah.
and that nobody had ever talked about it, but I guess they had not known that these things were in print or that were able to be researched and found.
Mhm.
And so as I started pulling these articles out, um, about 2009, I put together uh, all the information I found in a picture book. So in 2009, I still had a number of, actually, it might have been 2007. I had a number of older family relatives who were still living, who had given me what they knew, and I had compiled it all into a photo book. And I printed up, had several copies printed at my expense, and sent it to them. And they were flabbergasted because they also had never known the history of the Galloway name or who those Galloway people really were in Texas. So for them, it was they were really excited. It was really a blessing, and to see the looks on their faces, to go through that book and see the collaboration of all those photos and newspaper articles. And I actually found the records where Henry purchased the ranch, where he registered his brand, and it had all that kind of information in it, and it just blew them away. And so from there, I just started collecting stories from the people because once you give people something to look at and something to jog their memories, then all of a sudden, oh yes, I do remember that. Oh, well, let me tell you about this. Or actually, what I remember is this. And so I started collecting all of those stories from the people that were still alive at that time. And unfortunately, now that I've gotten as far as I have, uh, so many of them have passed, and that's the tragedy to me, that I've gotten even more information now, and it's just now that I'm getting ready to actually have an actual book that's going to be published about this, and, the people that really gave me the information have passed away, and that breaks my heart. But they're alive and well in these stories that I'm telling, because it's through them that I was able to capture this information, and, it's very poignant to me, very very touching to me, because these people that told me these stories, as they were telling them, and as I got them to, sometimes you have to coax older people to to give you the story,
Mhm.
but man, to see their reaction when they saw that book and how they felt, and that I'd only printed up a certain number of them initially because, like I
Yeah.
said, I did it at my cost, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden, "Can I get one of those books?" Okay.
Well, it's been a huge labor of love for you for years and years.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, and I think one of the fascinating things about you that I know, right, is that you come from a line of very strong women. You're
Oh, yes.
and you're that has gone against societal odds and conditioning, let's call it, right?
Yes.
Henry's mom gave all of her kids last names, which was really not
Y
common at the time, especially
correct.
for a slave woman.
Yes.
Um, and you're married to a super strong woman who's been in a non-traditional career path herself, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And even my own mom was absolutely phenomenal. Uh, quick story, I
Mhm.
had gotten when I was in college, there came a moment where I wanted to quit, where I felt like, "Okay, I've gone as far as I can go. This is becoming overwhelming. I don't think I can get past this." So I called her to tell her that I was gonna quit. And man, she told me, she chuckled at first and she said, "We've come too far to quit now. Go ahead and finish this." And she hung up the phone. She just said, "Finish it."
Yeah.
And there was no more comment. That was the end of the conversation. She was not going to listen to anything about not finishing or giving up. That was not in her vocabulary.
Yeah.
She was absolutely phenomenal. She had an amazing career herself. She worked for the Aerospace Corporation for 25 years, and then she worked for Xerox for, I think, another 10 years before
Oh
she.
wow. Yeah.
She was a phenomenal lady. So my point about that story
Yeah.
is that there was a day in time when I asked her, after I finished my degree,
Mhm.
I said, "So, Mom," she never finished college. That was the other reason. She had started college. She was an accounting major, and I said, "Mom, what, why didn't you could have been anything. Why did you decide to have a family?" And she looked at me and she said, she laughed again. She had this little chuckle, and she said, she shook her head like, "What kind of education did they give you?" She said, "Motherhood. Don't you know that's the highest calling? What else could I have been that would be equal to being a mother?" And I felt about that big. But she said it, she had a smile on her face, but it was a smile that just said, like she was shaking her head, like, "You haven't learned anything yet."
Well,
College.
at least she didn't tell you you made it a struggle.
No, she didn't say that. But that she thought, of all the things that I thought that she could do and that she was really, really good at, you know, uh, motherhood, she said, "It's the highest calling, son." What you when, she passed away in 2009, she's only 74.
Oh,
Um, I met people from her high school. She stayed in touch with everybody, and I met people from her high school graduating class, and they told me stories about it that even I didn't know at that point in time. She had been associate editor of the school newspaper. And so I was talking to the guy who was the editor, who told me she was the associate editor. And on her whole lifetime, I never knew that she liked to write, that she was good at capturing stories. My mother.
Pass that down.
And, and I never knew that. I never had the opportunity to have this conversation with her. That, Mom, you were associate editor on the school newspaper? And the guy said she was phenomenal, you know? Ah, yeah,
I think that speaks to how often we assume we know people, and there's always so much about individuals that we don't know.
right.
And it's just we can't know everything, and people themselves only show us what they want people to see, right? They don't show us everything.
Well, that's also like this interview. That you turned the tables on me. For numerous years, I've always been the person during the interviewing and not the interviewee. So this is an unusual situation for me.
Yeah, you spent your whole career in HR, right? Or at least the
The
most
majority of it.
significant part of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
How what
yes.
what made you get into that?
I got a good job offer.
Okay.
They made me an offer I couldn't refuse.
Yeah, yeah.
I had the good fortune to be responsible for a new program that the company that I worked for was starting, and they selected me to be an integral part of it. And part of that was selecting other people to go into the program, and it required I did college recruiting.
Okay, good.
I went
Yeah.
throughout California to colleges recruiting people into this particular program. And the program became quite successful. And as a result of that, I think in 2000, hmm, 2010 maybe it was earlier than that, I actually made a presentation to a conference of all of the major insurance companies um, in the Western region. And this was all the companies that these were executive for all the companies that are familiar with, property
Mhm.
casualty companies, big names. And I was part of I was on their agenda as a guest speaker to talk about and present this program because it was so successful that all of the other major carriers in the industry wanted to know about it.
Wow.
And I was the person who was selected to do that presentation. But prior to that, because of the success of the program, the head of the HR department, I worked for another department, and the head of the HR department called me in and said, I want you on my team. And that's how I got started in HR.
Well, what did you study in college?
I was a microbiology major.
Oh,
I
okay.
was
Yeah.
I was going to be a lab tech. I,
Okay.
I was a sickly teenager, and as a result, I had a lot of doctor visits, and I got to know the nurse in my doctor's office who was a lab tech also. And so I had to have I had to have a series of blood tests done and blood drawn. And over the course of time, I got to know her very well. And I said, well, what did you study? How did you become this? And I always liked science as a kid. I was drawn to science and science fiction. So as a kid, as a young teenager, my favorite gift was a microscope. I had a microscope
Yeah.
one year. Microscope, anything that had to do science kits. I was fascinated by that. So of course, watching this nurse and lab tech during this period of time where I had to have all these doctor visits and tests, I became drawn to that. So when I entered college, I went in as a microbiology major. And I was fortunate enough to get an internship, probably my junior year, uh, at the VA hospital at night,
Okay.
12 to 8.
Wow.
Now, it worked because of the time frame, but it didn't work because that's when
That's
the
yeah.
yeah, changed
That's
my mind.
that's a trying shift.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, changed my mind about that career.
Mhm.
And I came out of school. I was fortunate to get a job as a pharmaceutical rep.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I had all that science background,
Mhm.
and um, I went around to doctors' offices. Do you know what pharmaceutical reps do? Yeah,
I do. Yeah. I've known a few of them.
yeah, giving out samples, talking to
Yeah.
doctors,
Yeah.
getting their commitment to use the product, and giving all the
Uh-huh.
nurses a bunch of free stuff, and the
Yep.
doctors as well. Um, didn't like that. It was okay, but I didn't like that.
Well,
And
it's interesting because being a lab tech is very kind of introverted, and being a pharmaceutical rep is not.
and they liked the fact that the pharmaceutical rep job required this particular test, and I scored the highest on this test that measured supposedly your interaction with people.
Mhm.
So although personally I've always thought of myself as being introverted, that's
Yeah.
why doing this kind of interview is very
Yeah.
disarming for me. It's like, oh, gee, really? And that I scored that high, and I really didn't care that much for people. It was always the thing that struck me about being in HR. My
Yeah.
wife will tell you, I always thought of myself as being an introverted person. She said, "You're just a closet extrovert." Don't want people to know it. But anyway, you know, it, human resources turned out to be um, something that I could do.
Yeah. I remember when it wasn't even like a field of study, right, in universities until right like I graduated from high school in 88, and right about that time a few years before that there were certain schools that were starting to have HR as majors. Um, and it wasn't fully developed, I would say, until later, right, as far as all the business profession kind of majors go.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
as its own distinct entity.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. But my career seemed to take off from there, and the rest is history.
yeah, it's
So the
amazing.
quiet introvert, the science guy who preferred to be
Mhm.
by himself, winds up working in human resources and talking with people all the time.
And you're good at
Thank you.
it. Yeah. So, what other things in your life do you love besides business and science and clearly strong women?
Oh, my,
Actually, we did mention your wife had a very unusual job. Maybe we should, before we jump ahead, we should mention that.
that's exactly where I was going.
Okay,
Can't
that's
have
good. Yeah,
can't have
because you
a conversation
yeah,
unless we talk about my wife Tara.
yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal. And when I say phenomenal, I mean it. She worked for the Aerospace Corporation also, only she was a math and physics major. So she did the analytics, or excuse me, the interpolation of the satellite data for the Air Force. Now, she worked for the Aerospace Corporation, but the Aerospace Corporation uh, actually collaborated with the Department of Defense. So she was a civilian, but she did the interpolation of the satellite data and provided it to the military. And on a particular occasion, the person who was actually presenting the data to uh, the base commander could not answer some specific questions. So the base commander asked for the person who provided the data, and that person happened to be my wife. So they called my wife, and the military base was located right next to the Aerospace Corporation in El Segundo, California. And she came over, and the base commander said, "Did you provide this data?" And she said, "Yes." And then he said, "I need you to answer these questions." And she was able to answer all the questions that the second lieutenant who was doing the actual presentation couldn't. And the base commander looked at my wife and said, "Excellent. I want you here once a month on Monday mornings to present this data." So she became the only non-military civilian person giving briefings to the base commander on the defense satellite data. She was at a number of major defense satellite launches. She tracked and monitored the course of these satellites. And for a while, she also worked on in the division that handled the early space shuttle launches, and she tracked some specific data for them as well. But just her ability to uh, provide the interpolation of this data and then present it in a way where she could get people to uh, clearly understand what the data was showing was phenomenal. Since that time, since leaving that particular career, and she left probably in the mid '80s, she went back to college to learn computer systems because by that time computer systems were starting to take over.
Mhm.
And she worked for a company that set up cancer centers across the country in some of the major hospitals across the country. And she was the person who set up the computer systems that ran those cancer centers. So she worked at places like NYU, uh, here in California, Cedars, Desert Hospital in Palm Springs, um, Florida, Boca Raton, Miami. Um, wow,
Yeah.
just a number of key places where they had these cancer centers located, and she set up these sensors, so these cancer centers on their systems um, across the country, and just phenomenal.
Well, one of the things that has struck me about you is that um, you seem to have this awe and wonder about her, right? That hasn't been tarnished by age. Like so many people have long-term relationships where um, I don't know, they seem to take their partners for granted a little, or it's just not all shiny and new, right? So the relationship changes. But you always emit such joy and love and respect for her that just it floors me.
She's she just now the job with the cancer centers that ended a while ago,
Yeah.
a long while ago, and then she went to work for Kaiser and became their guru of some particular system that it's way beyond my pay grade and knowledge, and that she worked for Kaiser for 10 years and then went back as a consultant for another X number of years. And she just left there in December and finally decided, well, enough of that. And now she's looking at what she's going to do next. So June 17th, we just celebrated our 47th wedding anniversary. So you mentioned
Good
a lot.
for you. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. We just have fun.
Ah, that's
We
the key, huh?
we enjoy, yes, we enjoy each other's company. She makes me laugh.
Yeah.
I guess I make her laugh. And we
Well, and
enjoy
even
each other.
the name of the company that the 2 of you have together, right, has the word "united" in the title of it, which really says something to me about your relationship.
Wow, that's interesting that you had picked that. I noticed that you had picked that up initially the first time I gave you
Yeah.
the,
The
the
first
name
time
of
I
the
saw
book.
it, yeah,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes. That's R&T United Systems Inc.
mhm, yeah.
So,
So both of your first initials and the fact that
mhm,
you're united, yeah,
mhm,
that's
yeah.
amazing. I mean, you're such a great role model for your kids and your grandkids on what a relationship could be like and how to make one strong.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. They do seem to enjoy our family gatherings.
Yeah.
They do they do seem to enjoy coming together.
Do you think that you learned about how to have a healthy relationship from somebody in your life, or you think it just took work and it was the two of you figuring it out?
The two of us figuring it out.
Yeah.
The two of us figuring it out. Because at the end of the day, you and your it's you and your spouse. It's you and whomever your partner is.
Hmm.
And you can have examples, or you can read and research, or you can have counseling or sessions, but all that's just information. You still have to execute it. And the execution is occurs in that time that you spend together and what you do when you are together and just spending time together. So we try to do that. As busy as our careers have been and as demanding as our careers have been, we still found time to spend time.
That's good advice. Very good advice, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah. I remember years ago, my first husband and I, back when we were married, we were visiting friends overseas, and um, the woman in that partnership said, "Marriage is so hard. I have to remind myself every day that I love him." And I just thought, wow, that's really horrible. Because I thought our marriage was pretty easy. I mean, we came into it agreeing that we would be kind of equal partners, um, and I didn't have to remind myself every day that I loved him. And so I was kind of like, you know, I'm not so sure. Of course, things went south, and we didn't end up staying together. So maybe we needed to do more work than we were doing. I don't know. It's just one
Well,
of those crazy things, right?
if I
Yeah,
may, I'll give you one
yeah,
more story about my wife and I.
absolutely.
This is so we actually worked. We met at Sears and Roebuck, the department
Okay.
store,
You're the
and
only person I've ever heard say that.
so it's questionable. You're,
Yeah,
you're right.
yeah, it's
People at
okay.
Sears, do they really work?
Yeah.
But we got paid by Sears, and the first time we met, she was working days, and I worked nights. So I was the person that relieved her so that she could leave. And at that time, she went to school at night, and I was a senior probably, so I just had one class. And anyway, I showed up to work. I clocked in on time, but where she worked and the time it took me to get to where she worked, for her took too long. So when I arrived, she said, "You're late." Before she said hello, she said, "You're the guy that's supposed to be here. You're supposed to guy that I had to wait on. You're late. And because you're late, I'm going to be late getting to school for my class tonight. If you're going to come here, make sure you're on time." And she turned and just walked away. No name, no hello, nothing. Just cut and dry.
Uh-huh.
She left me standing there with my jaw dropped, like, wow. And the guy next that worked in the area next to me says, "Oh, you met the new girl, huh?" I said, "Who hired her?" So our first meeting was less than anything that you would imagine of being a love connection.
Yeah.
Didn't like me.
Unless you're a sucker for abuse, right?
Absolutely. I mean, she read me the riot act, didn't wait for me to give any excuse or reason, told me what she had to say, whirled around and split. And it's just, but that is who she is. She says what she has to say. She's a very matter of fact person. That's why details and data work well for her.
Yeah.
This is their
So
facts.
so when you arrived for work the next time, were you earlier?
I prefaced this story with stating that I had punched in on time. It was back in the
Yeah.
days when
Oh,
I
yeah.
was
Yeah.
I punched in on time.
Yeah.
I just didn't get to where she was in
Oh,
a
yeah.
timely manner. So I was always on time. That's just for the record. But for her, um, yes, after that, we never had that particular issue again.
Okay.
But the crux of the story lies in this story right here. I met her in the cafeteria one day. We happened to be in the cafeteria at the same time, or rather, I was in the cafeteria having a glass of water. It was between pay periods.
Uh-huh.
I'll just leave it at that.
Yes.
I'm having a glass of water in the cafeteria. She walks in and she looks over at me and she says, "What's the matter? You don't have any money?" Again, very
Uh-huh.
straightforward, very matter of fact. I said, "I do." And she said, "That's a that's a pretty small glass of water you have right there. Is that it?" And she looked behind the counter at the lady who prepared lunches and stuff, and she said, "Give that guy whatever he wants to eat." And I said, "No, no, no, no. I'm fine. I don't want anything." And she said, "Get what you want. The lady's gonna fix it. I'll pay for it." I said, "I don't want you to pay for anything." And she said, "It's too late now. I've already done it. So don't let me waste my money." And so I had lunch, and she sat down, and I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. I'll take you to dinner." She said, "I don't want your money, and you don't have to repay me, and you don't have to take me to dinner."
Yeah.
Anyway, she finally conceded, and it was 1974. It was the end of the year, and the movie The Towering Inferno came out. And it was at that time they had big theaters in
Mhm.
Hollywood, and it was a late night show. So I took her from I picked her up. We went to dinner. And we went to a late show in
Mhm.
Hollywood, and we had a phenomenal conversation in the ride from Long Beach to Hollywood, and that was the beginning.
Wow. And that drive took shorter back then than it does now.
No, but it still took a long time even back then.
Yeah.
But the conversation was so good. She had such vision and such clarity about where she wanted to go, what she wanted to do, and how she was going to get there. She's very systematic. She's
Mhm.
very logical in her approach to things. That's what makes her a good analyst. She's able to um, see things and break them down into their components and then reassemble them again in a way that gives you a better outcome than what you had before.
And so you said you've been married 47 years, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And what'd you do for your anniversary to celebrate? Did you go out?
Oh, we went to Las Vegas, but we had dinner at one of she loves Italian food, and it's a
Okay.
particular Italian restaurant where the service and the food is just so exceptional. It's a well-established place, been there for a number of years, and it's just an amazing place. It's kinda like Cheers, where everybody knows your name.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a locals place, so it's not really it's not on the strip. It's just a local
Yeah.
community, but it's a big name restaurant for Las Vegas. So we like going there, the service and just the atmosphere. It's very cool.
Nice. So do you have a favorite song, poem, quote, whatever about love?
What is my favorite love poem? Now it's not a hard question, but it's challenging. I'm a romantic at heart, so I love a good love poem. What comes to mind for me would be E. E. Cummings, his poem "I Carry Your Heart," and it's one of my favorites. I actually had that printed on parchment paper and framed for my wife and gave it to her as a one of our anniversary gifts one year. And my favorite love song, that's sort of like asking which one of your children is your favorite. There are so many. But in this particular case, I'd have to go with Inseparable by Natalie Cole. That was the intro song at our wedding. So Natalie Cole, Inseparable, my favorite love song.
My last guest, I don't know if you listened to the episode that came out last week, but he actually sang at the end of our thing. It was a surprise to me, but
Wow.
he did. He sang. I asked him what his favorite quote about love was, and he sang part of a song. It was beautiful. Um, you do some voiceover work. I know this for a fact
Yes.
because
Yes.
I've worked with you on a project like that. And
Yes.
I also know that you're looking for an agent or a publisher for your story about your family, right? And it's historical fiction.
Yes.
Um,
The title is Rise, The Legend of Henry Clay Galloway, Texas Cattle Rancher.
Good. And if somebody wants to get in touch with you, is the best way to do it through LinkedIn or is it through email?
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn? Okay.
Yes. Updating it now.
Oh, nice. Do you have a middle initial on it or just your name?
That's my name.
Okay. Nice.
It's Ralph Galloway.
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
So if anybody's listening to this and wants to talk to Ralph more about either of those things or anything else, that's go through LinkedIn. We're connected, so I know they can find you through me too,
Yes.
if you don't pop up for some reason.
But I cannot conclude without putting in this plug.
Oh no.
Jill Ferguson. I would not be right here, right now, without your coaching, mentoring, teaching. Even I cannot believe how much my writing has evolved and developed since working with you. And I'll thank you for that. Very,
Oh,
very.
thank you. Thank you so much. It's the story is so beautiful that you're telling, and it's just so powerful. And I guess I have one more little question before we leave.
Okay.
We mentioned that your great great grandmother, um, if he's your great grandfather,
Yes.
gave each of her kids the names of the men who
Yes.
um,
Fathered them.
fathered them. That's a good word. I wonder how much fathering they did. But anyway, um, have you been in touch with any of that side of the family, the men who were the parents, if you will, side?
Ye-
Any of their descendants?
Just one that was on the Galloway side. And so there were probably two or three people that I met that were DNA Galloway cousins,
Hmm.
the DNA cousins
Hmm.
that I am in direct contact with that really truly provided so much information. I cannot tell you the wealth of information that I garnered from the people that are on that side and how beneficial it was to me discovering the information that I uncovered. There was another uh, lady who helped me get Henry's mother's name was Jane. Jane had been enslaved in Mississippi and came from Mississippi, was brought from Mississippi to Texas. And I connected with a person whose family, I believe, brought Jane from Mississippi to Texas. And she has just been absolutely phenomenal. She actually provided uh, documents that showed um, that Jane had been with that family. And it was just amazing to come across that because in her documentation, she was able to show me connections to the other men who were uh, fathers of some of Jane's children. So I got to put the pieces together to see because these people were in a small area, small, close proximity to one another.
Mhm.
And once I had that, I already knew the names. And then once was able to find that there were people in that area with those names and find pictures of them and compare those photos to the photos of Jane's children, I didn't need the DNA to match. It
Yeah.
was clear. So that was a huge, huge help. Wow, that was
Well,
amazing.
That's really great. That I mean, because there's plenty of people that I know don't want to acknowledge the past, right?
Exactly, and particularly if that path includes having people of color. I worked in Texas for a while. I was responsible for an HR position.
Mhm.
We opened the office, believe it or not, in Texas. And one of the people that I had been in contact with only lived a few miles from where this office that I opened. So on one of my trips to Texas, I actually met and had dinner with a DNA cousin, a
Oh,
Galloway
nice.
cousin.
Yeah.
She was phenomenal also in providing information and helping with research and data on the Galloway side of the family. So that was very interesting.
And you're working on a second book in the series now too, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's a family saga. It's having 12 children. The sagas and the stories can
Yeah.
continue for a while. But just I'll give you a hint of another piece that's coming that you haven't seen yet. Bonnie and Clyde had a hideout in Texas, and it wasn't that far from the Galloway Ranch. So Henry actually encountered and met Bonnie and Clyde. Henry died in 1937, so he was alive and well when Bonnie and Clyde were traveling through Texas to their hideout in Texas. So I
Wow.
have a story about where Henry Clay encounters Bonnie and Clyde.
That's amazing. That's just so incredible. I mean, just the way that, well, I find because the way we teach history and all of the subjects in school, right, in this country is very disparate. So when you learn about historical things, you learn just about that history, but you don't learn what's going on in mathematics or literature or geography or anything else during that time period. And when we learn about math, it's very just math, right?
Yes,
And so putting history together with current events or what were current events and all these other things, we unless we do it ourselves, we don't get that as a form of education and able to piece everything together.
yeah.
So I love it when we learn how to piece things together like that.
Historical
Yeah,
facts with
yeah,
people that are not necessarily historical figures.
yeah. Wow, but he's a historical figure. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, Henry meets Bonnie and Clyde.
Unsung historical figure. Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to be on our show and to talk about your life and your writing and your wife and all the strong women in your life and everything else that we covered.
Well,
Really appreciate it.
thank you again for having me. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.